on Climate 2014. On behalf of Organizing for Action Penn State and Fossil Free, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Though many of us are here tonight, it's comforting to know that this is just a small sample of the environmental movement in State College. Tonight's speakers are just a few of our local leaders in climate change and sustainability issues. And I'd like to take a moment to call attention to their vastly different backgrounds. Speaking tonight, we have a meteorologist, a journalist, a lawyer, a community organizer, and an expert in solar energy. The broad spectrum of activism represented here tonight highlights the heterogeneous nature of the local environmental movement. And it also brings to attention the enormous potential in our community to affect multidimensional lasting change. A climate change activist does not need to be from any particular field or profession. They don't need to have been born in any specific generation, and they need no political affiliation. There are ways for all of us to be involved, and the need for action has never been more urgent. With so many moving parts, coordinating such a complex movement will never be easy. But as activists, we must remember that our collective goal of combating climate change is infinitely more important than any of our in-group differences. There is no single group or actor who can save us from climate change. And our best hope is to coordinate and to recognize that victories in our environmental community are shared by all of us. This is Organizing for Action's first semester on campus, and we've directed much of our energy towards climate change issues. Moving forward, we hope to utilize our vast national network of organizers and campaign staffers to provide grassroots training and for sustainability-oriented groups. Additionally, we intend to engage in action-oriented campaigns to provide tangible benefits to the environmental community in the area. The first of these campaigns that we'll be operating is called Solar Raising. Following this forum, we'll be working with Greenmore Gardens, which is a local organic cooperative farm, and the United States Department of Agriculture's Sustainable Ag Development Program to fundraise their transition to sustainable solar energy. We hope that this program will lead to the creation of a replicable model that will and to extend the benefits of solar energy to the Friends and Farmers Network and add a new dimension to community-supported agriculture. Info about how you can be involved in this campaign will be provided after the forum. And I'd now like to bring up to the podium our co-sponsor, President of Fossil Free Penn State.
All right, hey everybody, just want to thank you guys for coming out to this event. We have a lot of really cool speakers here, so it should be really good. I'm Nathan Lumpkin. I'm the president of Fossil Free PSU, Penn State's student fossil fuel divestment team. And I just want to tell you guys a little bit about our group and what we're trying to do. So, the mission of Fossil Free PSU is to encourage Penn State to remove its investments from the fossil fuel industry and move them into more sustainable investment options. Because currently, Penn State invests tens of millions of dollars each and every year in the fossil fuel industry, including at least $55 million in 2012 alone. Now these investments make Penn State part of the problem. By funding the fossil fuel industry, Penn State plays a contributing role in perpetuating climate change and all of the negative consequences that come with it. These investments are both environmentally and socially irresponsible. In addition to their environmental and social issues, they're also financially unsound for the university. That's because investments in the fossil fuel industry are very risky because fossil fuel companies' stock prices are inflated. And that's because they are based off the assumption that these companies will burn far more fossil fuels than is physically feasible if we hope to keep a sustainable climate. We all know that Penn State has a great, rich tradition of leadership, and divestment is another opportunity for us to further enrich that tradition. No schools near the size or caliber of Penn State have divested, and Penn State's doing so would set a great example for other schools. So there are a lot of benefits of divestment. Penn State can become a leader in the fight against global climate change. We can strengthen our financial security and enhance our image as an institution that's truly committed to sustainability. We'd love for you guys to join the movement. It's not going to be an easy fight, and so we need everybody's help. If you should feel so inclined at any point during this event, because other speakers are going to be alluding to divestment as well, you want to sign our petition, you can go to tinyurl.com/ffpsu, and we'll have petitions circulating afterwards if you want to sign physically. For more information, you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at fossilfreepennstate@gmail.com, or catch up with one of us afterwards. So, thanks again for coming out. The next thing we're going to have is a video from State College Mayor Elizabeth Gorham, who regrets not being able to be with us tonight, but is a big supporter of our cause. So, thank you, everybody.
Welcome to Onward Climate. And I am the mayor of State College Borough. I regret not being with you this evening because one of my top priorities as mayor is to speak out on behalf of sustainability and protecting the natural world we enjoy. The future is in our hands, and it is urgent we take action. Every dollar we spend is a vote for or against sustainability. And as consumer society, this is the biggest power we have. Use it. Be bold in your thinking. As Oscar Wilde once wrote, the only regrets we have in life are the risks we didn't take. Here are a few ways you can contribute to a good future and the natural health of our world without leaving State College. Most of you walked or rode your bike to the Kern building today. Thank you. What if we all took a week off from gas-powered transportation this summer? Walk down to Newly and let your mind consider how you can become a green entrepreneur. Check out the website of Friends and Farmers, a group of dedicated farmers and eaters committed to bringing a co-op of local food and products to State College. We must aim high and reduce our energy footprint. I signed a petition from 350.org encouraging cities and states to divest themselves of hydrocarbon stocks. New ideas, however, are needed to make this happen. Don't be afraid to tell others about the value of choosing wind power rather than coal-generated electricity. Protecting our ecosystems by choosing to eat organic food grown without pesticides, growing native plants that benefit the ecosystem. I am working to change my own life to reflect what I believe in, and I urge you to join me. Thank you.
Hello. So I'm here to introduce our first speaker, who is Lara Fowler. Professor Lara Fowler is an attorney and mediator who focuses on environmental and natural resource law, including water rights, water quality, flooding, tribal law, and Endangered Species Act issues. Prior to joining Penn State, she was an attorney at Gordon Thomas Honeywell, LLP, where she focused on mediation and dispute resolution of complex natural resource issues. Let's welcome Mrs. Fowler.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Lara Fowler, and you'll have to bear with me, I am a law professor here, so if I call on you, you can be advanced and forewarned. Wanted to give actually a little bit of framework. I am not coming at this from an advocacy perspective so much as a mediator or a facilitator perspective. I'll give you a little bit of background on why, but a few thoughts on sustainable community dialogue. I'm actually housed both in the law school as well as the Land and Water Building with the Sustainability Institute. Work near them, but have a joint position with the Penn State Institutes of Energy and Environment. We've been talking actually a lot about sustainable communications, sustainable dialogue on a lot of topics that relate to climate change. And how you actually have conversations about these really, really difficult issues. So I'm coming more from that perspective and how you can, if you will, organize a conversation for success on difficult topics. And I'll show you a little bit more. Where I'm coming from, just as a bit of an aside, particularly for the students, I actually got interested in water issues in high school. And through, as an undergrad, was able to do research projects that ultimately has led a number of years later to where I am now. So if you're wondering, does what you do as a student matter? Sure. So I have worked up and down the West Coast on a lot of really, really contentious issues. Who gets to store and use groundwater in the greater Los Angeles area? How do you fix flooding in Washington State, second largest river basin? Small food fight between Northern and Southern California over water supply and allocation. Lots of parties, lots of very difficult issues, lots of very angry people. Go. I went to law school with the idea of doing mediation and dispute resolution, with the idea that having a legal background would be really helpful, and have been blessed with being able to work on that. Here at Penn State, we moved here about 2 years ago, and have been involved with trying to think about some of these topics within the university. So basic framework that I think about when I'm dealing with disputes or dispute resolution is a three-piece of a triangle. What's the substance? What are the issues? People often really want to be talking about that, but they get tangled up in a couple other places. People in the relationships. I don't trust you, I'm not going to talk to you. We don't have a good relationship, we can't work with each other. And so they never get to talk to the substance because they don't trust the message. The other place people get hung up is on process. I don't like how we got there. I'm not going to even get to being able to talk about what I think is really important. So common characteristics, there's a great book. Carpenter and Kennedy wrote a book called Managing Public Disputes. Very readable. It's not written for lawyers at all, I promise. But it basically says, hey, if you're dealing with a public dispute, there's some really common characteristics. And a lot of the issues that are associated with climate change end up as a dispute. You have substantive questions, differences in expertise, maybe financial, maybe regulatory, maybe technical. Broad range of issues, often without a lot of clarity. This is where we need scientists, but it's often hard for scientists to weigh in if there's a lot of polarization. Parties and relationships. You guys can read these, but network of interest is pretty complicated. There's new parties that come on and say, hey, I'm interested. Different forms of power. I spend a lot of time thinking about power. What is it? How do you change a power imbalance? Somebody feels really powerful because they have a lot of money. Somebody else feels less powerful. How do you balance that so you can actually have a conversation about tough stuff? Lack of continuing relationships. Somebody moves, people change jobs, the characters change. What do you do? How do you deal with really strongly held values and values that are sometimes shifting? Procedural. There's lots of different decision-making processes. Great, I work for a nonprofit. I have to go to a board of directors. That's different than saying, hey, I'm Penn State. What's my position as Penn State? You want to know a really difficult job? Just actually had a conversation last week with the Solicitor General of the United States. He has the job of going and arguing in front of the Supreme Court. He gets to figure out what the position of the United States is in front of the Supreme Court. And that may be representing the Department of Defense, the Department of Health, you know. You pick your range, and he has to decide what a position is and go and argue it. Finding an institutional perspective can be really hard. So if you're asking Penn State writ large to do something, know that that's actually a very significant challenge. Unequal accountability. Different things, you know, some people are beholden to voters, other people are beholden to a board of directors. Different kinds of power, again, different accountability within structure. And non-standard procedures. A lot of the work I've done, I've had to make up mediation processes to deal with some of the issues. This is a pretty complex graph. Again, I recommend the book for being able to look at this. But the basic gist of this is if you don't think about managing disputes, the more you deal, basically the conflict gets harder and harder to deal with. I can come back to this if you want, but thinking about how do you slow down a conflict, how do you really engage in discussion, how do you get out of saying I'm right and you're wrong. I'm going to give you a very quick illustration. I want you to all think for a second what you think when I say the word cat. Just imagine a cat. Okay, who thought of Garfield? Anybody? I'm dating myself now. I personally thought of the cat that started yelling at me when I moved this morning and asking for dinner or breakfast. Each of you probably had a very different version of the same word in mind. And the reason I bring this up is you may think, all right, cat, how hard is that? Well, we all had a different vision of what we were thinking about. So when I'm working with parties in a dispute, I often say, really, please get curious, don't get mad. I didn't understand what you said. I'm not going to assume malintent. I'm going to assume I maybe don't understand where you're coming from. That you may have a very different and very valid frame of reference. But if I don't know what that is, it's a little hard for us to communicate. Defining the issues. What's really the issue? Not the position, but the interest behind it. Adding expertise, facilitating effective meetings, thinking about consensus. Consensus is a hard one. We can talk for a long time about that. I'm not going to. But success. You know, are parties satisfied, their interests are met? Is the outcome efficient, broadly defined? And have the relationships improved? So notes on being a mediator or facilitator. Mediator is actually defined in law. I sometimes feel like I'm wearing a cloak of invisibility around me all the time. I've worked in processes where I can't tell you what the parties told me. It's protected and privileged. And you can read this as a Uniform Mediation Act. Mediation privilege. I can't be forced to testify in court for some of what I've worked on. Fine with me, don't want to testify in court, working with the parties on an informal or a formal basis. But a lot of these skills roll over to facilitation. And the skills look like this. Who are the parties? I got sent to Los Angeles. Here, go fix water in Los Angeles. All right, I'm been to LA, it's big. How many people are there? I had to figure out who the parties were. How do you identify the issues that people are thinking about negotiating? How do you improve communication? I'm not going to talk to that person, I don't trust them. How do you translate or reframe in ways that people can actually think about an issue and start to reach resolution? What are the interests? What are the options? Okay, reality. Great, we've got this rate plan, it's going to cost $7 billion. Now what? How do you build trust? How do you legitimize an agreement and get people to agree to it? I'm going to give you a very quick case study. This is actually Interstate 5. If you ever driven between Seattle and Portland, this is what it looked like in 2007. This is not what you want your interstate freeway to look like, nor is it what you want your community to look like. This is the Chehalis River Basin. This is Seattle, for those of you maybe who've ever been there. This is the basin down south. This is what it looked like in 1996, and in 2007, and again in 2009. This area has been some very, very serious floods. Go back. Basically 4 floods of record, 1990, 1996, 2007, and 2009. This community was at war with each other on what to do about this. I got to serve as the facilitator for the local council that was put in charge of fixing this issue. And it was a very interesting process, and the reason I bring it up is a case study. So I worked with the community, and they went from being very, very polarized, can't even talk to each other, don't put me in the same room, public officials saying, give me dynamite, I'll blow up Mellon Street Bridge, that'll take care of the problem, to this. This is one of the little cities saying, hey, we get that we're all in this together, and in order for us to find a solution, we all need to be working with each other. A lot of work went on between those two places. Give me dynamite, we'll take care of the problem, to this is a complex situation, we really need to work with each other. But if I have to step back from a lot of what I've done, floods, droughts, and everything in between, it's when you can actually communicate with each other and work through very, very difficult scientific, policy, economic questions that you can start to resolve some of these and gain forward traction. This was an area where people were like, do not make me get meetings in this place. Now they're like, wow, this is a national example of how to have really good conversations about really hard things. Excuse me. There's a really big role actually for a university in this. Ruggles House Center Public Policy is at University of Washington and Washington State. It's a marriage actually between those two universities. And they've been able to help facilitate the ongoing discussion, report, scientific work, and engagement on, again, this really difficult topic. So if I go back and say, okay, here's my basic framework for thinking about issues like this. Research, natural science, social science, decision sciences, training, convening discussions, and then helping translate are all really, really important skills for dealing with any of the issues that come up that are associated with climate change. So I think this is interesting. Eleanor Ostrom actually won a prize, major prize, Nobel Prize in Economics. One of the only women to have done so. She actually got her start looking at the same basin I worked on in Los Angeles. And her basic point was, hey, people are part of the equation, and if you can't figure out how to work with people, the technical side is really going to get you there. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. Happy to answer questions. Sit down and have a cup of coffee. Yeah, I actually got to hear the Dalai Lama speak a number of years ago, and he gave a really interesting talk, and one of the things he said that really stuck with me is, the governor of the state was interviewing him on stage in front of several thousand people, and she basically said, if you had one wish for world peace, what would it be? And he said, you know what, I would love to take the world leaders and their families, and I'd go out and I'd have a cup of coffee, or excuse me, I would go out basically and take them on vacation, 10 days. Maybe at the end of it, they can talk business, but not before. And his basic point is, I've seen it time and time again, is if you don't know where people are coming from at a very personal level, very hard to do anything on substance. If what you're giving somebody else's positions, I want fossil-free, period, but without exploring some of the interests behind it, it's very hard to have a conversation that gets past that position and sort of, I'm not going to talk to you further. One of the things we did in the Chehalis, and again gave you that as a very brief case study, was we started taking the meetings out of the local courthouse where they'd always been to the grand cities of Seattle and Montesano and Cosmopolis. You've never heard of these cities, there's a reason why, they're tiny. But we take people on these little itty-bitty tours. They go out, start talking about their kids, start talking about fishing, their jobs, and by little, you could see the relationships building so that they could actually talk with each other about very hard things. Yeah?
Have there been any floods on I-5?
They were very perilously close this year, actually. Despite the fact that much of the West Coast is in incredible drought, this area was like inches away. But interestingly enough, they were able to start doing lots of baby projects. And so they were actually analyzing how their baby projects were doing. It actually made a big difference. Some of the areas they were able to clear out culverts. The 2007 flood that I showed you actually killed off most of the dairy birds in that area. It's a tough thing when you watch a fifth-generation dairy farmer in tears because he had to listen to his cows drown. So they built places for the cows to go. Simple things like that, but it started to also build the rhetoric of, we can do this, versus this is the Chehalis and all we ever do is fail. And so you could see that narrative of success actually coming through as people, and you can see in the quote from the city of Montesano, saying, we're all in this together. It made a huge difference. So they were this close, but it didn't flood. Other questions? All right, thank you for your time, and look forward to the rest of the
for coming out today. Our next speaker has become one of the most important voices in understanding climate change over the past couple of decades. A distinguished professor of meteorology here at Penn State, Dr. Michael Mann has notably served as lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, culminating in the organization's receipt of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. Although Dr. Mann is currently doing business in Florida, he was able to film a short video to assist Onward on climate. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Michael Mann.
Fossil fuel-free ESU folks. I want to thank you all for your efforts to establish a more sustainable world by raising awareness here at Penn State for the threats of ongoing fossil fuel burning. As many of you know, if the world continues to burn fossil fuels at the current rate, global warming will likely rise 2 degrees Celsius, 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit within a couple decades, crossing a potentially dangerous threshold. Many scientists think will hurt all aspects of human civilization, water, health, food, energy, our economy, and national security. In my article, False Hope, in the current April issue of Scientific American, I reveal the urgency of the problem. If we are to avoid committing our substantially more dangerous and potentially irreversible climate change, we need to move ahead rapidly in transitioning to a clean energy economy. College students have often led the way in mobilizing public opinion on critical societal issues, whether it's the free speech originated among Lauder at UC Berkeley in the 1960s, or the anti-apartheid divestment movement, which rose to prominence while I was a student at UC Berkeley in the mid-1980s. And so it is with climate change. It's your voices and your efforts which may finally break through into the public consciousness. So keep up what you're doing. It's tough work, but it's critical if we are to leave behind a healthy planet for you, our children, and grandchildren, and future generations. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Mr. Eric Sauder, got his Master's of Science Architectural Engineering from Penn State. He then co-founded New Leaf Initiative in August of 2012. He chose to start New Leaf to create neutral space for the State College community to connect complementary resources and bring new ideas to life. Mr. Eric Sauder.
Good evening, everybody. How are you all? Good. Can I get a quick show of hands? Who are students here? Okay, very good. Who are community members? Okay, awesome. There's some of both. I encourage you to meet each other afterwards, because that's a lot of what we'll talk about here today. It's been a very important thing for me. So, as we hear Michael Mann, and as we look at the things that we're talking about and facing the reality of climate change, I believe the case is really clear. And it demands action, and it demands that we do something about it. And I think in the face of that, this is a really hard challenge. So he talked about, get out and do something. Get out and, make a difference. And then the video is over. And it's hard. And I've felt really paralyzed by this a lot. And so if you're in that place now, it's some of what I want to talk about today. Because I am still working through how to figure out what valuable things actually are to do. These problems seem immense. And in the face of it all, it seems like anything that we do seems kind of small. And I feel like I've been working to try to make the world a more sustainable place for a little while now. And actually, I think it's just a lot more carbony than if I wouldn't be here. So how do you balance these things? Like, how do you not get paralyzed by this guilt? So I want to talk a bit today about making a vision for seeing the world be a better place in terms of climate into a vocation that is something that we actually live out and do. And this is an experiment. This is something that I'm still very much in the path of, so only take my ideas with a grain of salt. So I wanted to share a little bit about my story and a couple suggestions for engagement and places to get involved here. So when I came to Penn State, I wanted to make the world a better place. And I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know what it meant. But I wanted to try to start doing things. I got involved in a bunch of things with the then Center for Sustainability, now Sustainability Institute. Worked on a lot of different sustainable housing projects and really found an interest in the built environment and how we build the things that we interact with in a day-to-day life, how we make them more sustainable. Through that involvement, I got plugged into different parts of our community. I got involved in different affordable housing issues. I saw the capacity that we have here at the university for design. I saw the wealth of resources we have in the community in for-profit and non-profit organizations. And one of the things that I saw that was a big frustration for me was it felt that there was a big gap between the resources that we have and what we're able to do with them as a community. And this isn't a community scale thing. This is a global world kind of thing. I got to hear an astronaut speak, which was a childhood dream of mine. His name's Ron Guerin, and he talked about this vision of an orbital perspective. He spent like 144 days on the space station, and he talked about looking at the Earth without any political boundaries or things that we're used to with maps, and just how it all seemed so small, and it seemed that there were more than enough resources on this planet for all of us to be fed. And at the very least, there shouldn't be 1 billion people going to bed hungry every night. We should be able to figure this out. So this is a real challenge that's weighed on my mind. How do we take the resources that we have and arrange them in a way that meets these challenges? So that's really the energy that and ideas that was behind our thinking when we started New Leaf Initiative. It's a nonprofit here in State College that's still trying to figure these things out. It was very clear from the beginning that we had no idea what we were doing. And it's an experiment, and it's an ongoing attempt to try to build bridges between these different parts of our community. And the one thing that I don't think I realized is how complex this idea of starting things is, and how untrained I was to do that. I think we do an awful lot here at the university to teach specific skills training. And so we have a lot of programs that teach about like the water resources or the built environment or these other things. And I think it's really interesting that I get to speak after Lara. I think there's so much importance in the mediation and the work to figure out how to connect these resources to each other that we're really missing in our communities. I didn't realize the time that it would take. I didn't realize the patience that it would require, or the boundless energy that would have to be expelled to do something about this. To shorten the story of New Leaf, we're entering our 4th year and we're just starting to figure some things out. We opened a co-working office downtown that is a place for community members and students and all kinds of people with ideas to come and do their work. And hopefully people will run into each other, and we call them happy collisions will happen out of that. And people will find ways, and we will hopefully be able to make connections and spark new things out of that to help this room and our communities to really carry out the visions that you all have for how to make the world a more sustainable place. So I wanted to share a couple observations that I've had over the past couple of years in starting this. The first one is don't forget the value of a vision. Ideas are really important. And the people that are in this room, you're here because you've caught the vision of how important this is. There's a lot of people that aren't here. There's a lot of people that haven't seen that. So don't forget the importance of finding that value. Second, doing something with that vision is a really hard next step. And I don't know how to make it easier. We talked about training for technical proficiency, but it's really hard, and I think one of the things that we need to do a lot better is figure out how to train for trying new things and venturing out a little bit past what we're comfortable with, and risking something for something good. Third, this takes experimentation. And experimentation often means failure. But I want to encourage you that failure isn't the end of things. And oftentimes it's the beginning of the next thing that might be a better thing. And it might also lead to a failure too. But one of the things that this continual experimentation helps you to do is it grows your capacity to try new things, to take risks, and to make that change. Fourth, and we've covered some of this before, this isn't going to be too much of a surprise, but the problem and the solution are bigger than you are, and I am. So these things are massive in scope. This is the world that we're talking about, and it's a global challenge. But I would encourage you to not be paralyzed by that, but to be free. This is a thing that we are all taking part of and that we are all participating in. So don't let the immensity of the challenge be the thing that keeps you from taking a first step on it. And fifth, this is very related to that, and I think it's the conclusion that I've wrestled with, how we work with these tremendously huge problems. And that is that I believe it takes a community to do anything about them. I think we need to figure out how to break out of the areas of comfort that we're in, cross lines between different sectors or disciplines. There's a lot of people that are doing very similar things at the university that don't know about each other, or the same thing happens in town, that don't know that these parallel efforts are happening, that are mutually beneficial and can work together. Or I think one of the most important things is between generations. One thing that I've gotten to notice in my work that's most exciting to me is a tremendously awesome potential pairing between two generations in our communities. One that has been fired up about changing the system for a long time, many years, and has a lot of work already that they've done in this. Their kids are maybe off to school, and time is opening up again, and they're looking at the world again and saying, what do we do now? Like, where do we plug in? And they're noticing the same energy in you all, students, that are excited about this and passionate and feel like this is something really important. And one thing, many of you don't know each other. So students, again, raise your hands. I get to speak in some classes, and this is a fun experiment. So keep your hands up if you should always think about how you're going to run an experiment. So stand, yes, that's a great idea, because then you can actually see things. So students are here, and everyone else find a student afterwards. But now, sit down if you know 2 or fewer community members. Does that make sense? Wow. So the folks that are still standing know more than 2 community members. Okay, so sit down. Thank you very much. Community members, up. Now do the same thing, but you're with students, not community members. So if you know 2 or fewer. Okay, we're doing pretty well there. Many of you are professors. That is hard. Okay, sit down. We get the point. This has been a real challenge, I think, but it's a real exciting opportunity for good things to happen by bringing these energies together through everything good that has happened with New Leaf to this point is because of really positive intergenerational collaboration, and I hope that it keeps increasing and keeps being so. So please meet each other afterwards. I was going to leave you with action items. That was one of them. The second one is think of something that you have wanted to do that you haven't tried yet, that you believe is an accomplishable scope in a month. And try that. The reason I set the month limit is because if it gets too big, it's crazy. And it's good to have crazy things. So you keep that on the back burner. But one of the things that I think is really important is in trying new things to have wins. And to have something that you did and it worked and it was great. Or you did and it failed and now you can try it again and have another one of those iterations. That's important too. And don't despair. but try things. And in that process, also try to step out of your comfort zone, whatever that is. Try to push that thing a little bit past what you're accustomed to. Maybe it's meeting someone new that also has a similar interest. If a forum to do that would be helpful, New Leaf is an open space for people to come and talk about these things. We're located in the Berta building in State College, downtown. It's where you pay your parking tickets, but upstairs. So please, this is really important stuff, and I care about it deeply. One of the things that I feel unfortunate in my current position, I am a host of New Leaf. I'm a facilitator and convener. I like to bring people together, but I don't actually get to do anything. I don't get to work on projects. I don't get to really see the change come to life myself that I really believe in and care about. So I'm asking all of you to get engaged in these things so I can be connected and energized by it again. So thank you all for your time. Do you have any questions? Okay.
How do you scale all this up, you know? I mean, you know that this is a place called it. International policy, you know, on energy use, on fuel industry, whether use fossil fuels, pipelines from Canada. You see individuals like Elon Musk, for example. I mean, there's one person that can really kind of change the world. But how do we scale up, you know, all the feel-good sort of stuff that you do that, you know, that you're talking about building relationships. And the world is still going to be going to hell all around us. You know, we may be in some kind of bubble.
No, this is true. So one of the things that I've had to come to terms with is to understand business and business models, and that's been one of the hard things about New Leaf, to actually create a business model that is self-sustaining, and it's taken a long time for us to do that, or to come to terms that we actually have to. But the hope with that is that if we can create spaces like this that can be replicated and adopted in other places, I hope our model can get stolen really quickly. And I'm excited about this, looking at different local movements. I'm excited about how the local food workings are just spreading like wildfire. And I think it's a very different model than what we've seen before in sort of like big corporate sorts of things, where you have IP and you have this deep desire to, you know, not share anything. I think what we're going to see with this new culture of businesses is more models that people are being very open with. This is what's working. I see collaboration between farmers that doesn't make sense. Farmers that should be competitors that are saying, hey, try this. Like, this is working for us. This could work for you. Because they're recognizing the importance of this shared vision together, and they're recognizing that if both of us are doing better, this whole thing is doing better. So I think change needs to and will happen at all different levels. And you see that with the people that are talking here tonight. The thing that I care about most is these really local communities and how we can see excitement and regeneration and rebirth in them that hopefully will be contagious. Anybody else? Thank you. Yeah.
Could you give us like an example of an intergenerational, like a generational relationship, of what came from it, what happened? What you're focusing on?
Yeah. So a big one has been with housing stuff. Because because there's been such a long-standing work in this community with housing efforts. And so we've gotten to see a bunch of students and community members that are working together to really plan action steps for how do we do something about this? Like, how do we use resources from the university and from nonprofits and for-profits, and how do we combine all these things in a way that would be transformative?
Housing, do you mean like putting people in homes or?
In affordable, sustainable housing in this region. It's been a tough 3-4 years in State College with housing. A bunch of mobile home parks, a bunch of options that have been, doors that have been closed, and it's not getting better. So I think that's been a space where we've gotten to see a lot of people come from different spaces. It's one that I think has some of the most exciting potential, but certainly isn't fully delivered yet. But yeah, it's really some really cool stuff happening here. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Bill McKibben. He is an author, environmentalist, and founder of 350.org. Among his numerous accomplishments, Bill McKibben wrote the first book on global climate change for a general audience in 1989. He was awarded the Bounty Prize in 2013 and is a key voice in the divestment movement. Unfortunately, he can't be with us personally tonight, so he's sending his support via video, and we're very thankful that he took the time to give us encouragement and speak to us here at Kent State. So let's give a round of applause for Bill McKibben.
Hello, everybody. This is Bill McKibben. I very much wish that I was there in Happy Valley with you. It's one of my favorite places, and it's one of the great schools, as you guys know, on the face of the earth. And that's why I'm especially glad that you guys are engaged, committed, involved, and working hard on this climate stuff, particularly on the divestment stuff. Let me back up for a minute and just give you a little tour of where we are right now. I wrote the first book about global warming for a general audience. I did it a quarter century ago, i.e. before a lot of you were born. And the only thing that's changed since 1989 is that climate change turned out to come at us even harder and even faster than we thought it would. You all probably seen the big report that the world's scientists, including a big shout out to your colleague Michael Mann, issued earlier this week. It came out, or earlier this month, it came out of Yokohama. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and basically they said, look, this is by far the biggest thing that the world has ever seen. We've been telling you about it for 2 decades. Everything we know about it makes us understand that it's going to be worse than we thought. In fact, it's no longer a projection of the future. It's now a description of what's already starting to happen. The Arctic is already melted. The ocean's already grown 30% more acidic. We're seeing erratic weather across the planet, extreme drought, famine in lots of places, conflict already breaking out, and that's with the temperature increase so far, barely 1 degree Celsius. On our current trajectory, we're headed for 4 degrees Celsius, 4, 5, 8 or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. We're headed for a world where the good education that you guys are getting will be meaningless because your job for the prime of your careers will be responding as best you can to an endless ongoing series of emergencies and crises and disasters. Unless we get our act together very fast. The good news is we understand now what getting our act together looks like and how we do it. Engineers at places like Penn State have done an amazing job of providing us with the technologies that we need. 25 years ago, we really didn't know if sun and wind and things were up to it, but they are. I just got off the phone with a reporter from the Houston Chronicle who told me wind was supplying a third of the power in Texas. We can make this happen, but only if we scale it up very, very fast. And for that to happen, we have to overcome the inertia in the political system that is the result of the power of the fossil fuel industry. That's the biggest, richest industry on earth, and hence much more politically powerful than it should be. They've been able to dominate things and keep us from making really significant changes. Most of all, they've been able to avoid ever having to pay for the damage that their product, carbon, is doing in the planet. And so we need to take them on. That's at the root of what this divestment fight is about. The discovery 2 years ago that the fossil fuel companies of the world had 5 times more carbon in their reserves than any scientist thought it would be safe to burn, and yet that they were planning to burn it anyway, was a remarkable one. In essence, we then knew 2 years ago that if they carry out their business plan, then the planet tanks. And that's why we went to work on this divestment fight, and that's why it spread so quickly. Oxford University said last fall that it's become the fastest growing such corporate campaign in history. A few places have already divested. Others have said, oh, no, let's aim for constructive engagement with this fossil fuel industry and see if we can't persuade them to change their ways. And I mean, I understand the impulse to do that because it's nicer. In fact, some people have been successful in at least starting to engage. A few weeks ago, Exxon agreed to a shareholder resolution asking it to disclose its carbon risk, to talk about what it was going to do with these stranded assets, these huge reserves it has of oil and gas that, if it burns, will unhinge the planet's climate. And in the very last day of March, they put out their response, their official response. They said, we're going to burn it, and we're going to find more and burn it. And we do not think, they said they thought there was negligible risk that the world's governments would regulate them in any way that would prevent them. In essence, in translation, they said, we're going to overheat the planet. We don't think you can stop us, and we dare you to try. That's why we need you guys to try. That's why we need you pushing hard for divestment, for pushing hard to make Penn State recognize and accept the idea that these guys are not part of the future, that they're part of the past, that they are taking us down a path that we simply can't go any further. Fossil-free PSU is absolutely correct, and it's not just me saying so. At this point, it's, the World Bank and the International Energy Agency and everybody else who has recognized the basic math of climate. If you divest, it will not immediately bankrupt Exxon. It will, however, start the process of politically bankrupting them. Already that process is underway. The oldest Protestant denomination in the U.S., the United Church of Christ, has asked people to divest. Anglican dioceses around the world, 10 or 12 already, colleges and universities in every corner of the country. Increasingly, pension funds and foundations are taking their money out of the fossil fuel industry. Everybody's demonstrated by this point that you can do it without financial penalty. Indeed, you reduce financial risk by getting out ahead of this carbon bubble. The only question is whether people are willing to stand up to the immense political power that comes with wealth in our society. You can see it at work in Pennsylvania as you can almost any place else. The rapid spread of fracking, for instance, is a reminder all the time of just what bad things you can get done if you have money. We don't have money. That can't be the currency we work in. We need to work in the currencies of movements, passion, spirit, creativity. Sometimes we got to be willing to spend our bodies and go to jail. I hope some of you will join us in September in New York for what I think will be the next great big climate demonstrations and civil disobedience. But long before that, you've got lots of work to do there in Happy Valley, and I so salute you for doing it. You follow what you do around the country and indeed around the world. 350.org works in 181 countries, and those people in every corner of the world, our friends in Bangladesh or in the Maldives or in South Africa, they're all paying attention to what's happening in the U.S. because they understand what a key place it is. And in the U.S., of course, we understand that Pennsylvania is one of the great swing states, one of the places that will decide our future, and we understand that the most important institution in the state of Pennsylvania is the one you are at, and you guys are changing that institution. And we're so grateful for that work. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Brownson, serves as lead for the solar option within the Renewable Energy and Sustainable Systems Program. Dr. Brownson's research is focused on solar resource assessment and systems performance and photovoltaics in buildings. He has also participated with the DOE Sunshot Initiative for solar forecasting in the DOE Energy Efficient Buildings Hub at the Pennsylvania Naval Yard. Dr. Brownson also serves as a faculty lead for the Penn State team in the 2009 Solar Decathlon held in Washington, D.C. He's a member of the American Solar Energy Society's Board of Directors, representing the interests and voice of students and faculty and advocating the critical importance of our young professionals in the health and future of the industry.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming out. And so part of my job tonight is to kind of give you that, how might we see an option outward? And solar energy is certainly one of those really positive images for a lot of society. So the starting point that I want to think about, I just kind of want to frame solar energy before I start talking about where solar energy might fit inside of the future for Penn State, for Pennsylvania, for the nation. The first thing we want to kind of do is to kind of get everybody up to speed, because a lot of people will come into the story of solar energy with information that is outdated. And that information is outdated about every year now, because the industry grows exponentially and it changes dramatically. So what you're seeing is this kind of price of photovoltaics. So photovoltaics are the panels that generate electricity from the sun's light. It's one form of solar energy conversion that we think about. But it's a great proxy for kind of the movement forward of solar energy as a technology in today's society. So you're seeing 1977 as that really tall bar up there, at which point the cost of manufacturing a unit of a solar panel was about $76, $77 a watt. And then you see that kind of really steep drop off in curve until we get over to 2014, at which point the cost of manufacturing a solar panel is now about 74 cents. And again, what I'm saying about things changing very dramatically is now we're down in the 60-cent range. It is changing dramatically, and that dramatic change in cost of manufacturing is happening as the industry learns how to make new photovoltaic panels. And so what that process is called, it was given a name much like when we think about microchips and we think about the effect of how microchips will get smaller and smaller and smaller as the industry gets bigger and bigger. That effect is replicated in a sense, and it was called the Swanson effect. This is after Richard Swanson, who was a leader, is a leader at the Sun Power Company, a photovoltaic manufacturing company. And effectively, we find, just from the data, that we have a 17 to 24% drop in the cost of making photovoltaics every time the industry doubles in size. Okay? Now, The next question is, how often does the industry double in size? Well, nowadays, it's less than 2 years. So every 2 years, the photovoltaic industry effectively doubles in size. And this is a global scenario. So this is an exponential growth phenomenon. The same thing that we hear like David Suzuki talking about when we have too much growth and eventually we run out of Earths. And so we make another Earth and it makes us last for 1 more second or along those lines. The same kind of exponential growth is in a growth trend for photovoltaics. So it's growing faster than you might think. And so the thoughts, the data that you might have had from 5 years ago was at least 2 doublings ago. And so we have to stay current with what's happening. What happens when photovoltaics grows is other interest in solar technologies grow. And so we have awareness of solar technologies increasing, and that is other technologies like solar for hot water systems, using solar for hot air systems. Actually looking at the way that we look at the entire building system as a solar energy collector or a control system for managing solar energy. That awareness builds as we have more and more understanding for solar energy as a technology just kind of permeating through society. And so what we're going to see with photovoltaics especially, but largely solar energy technologies in general, is the same thing as the cell phone effect. You know, you're going to be 1 year, okay, a couple people have these. 5 years later, okay, well, it seems like all the wealthy people have these now, and maybe a couple of years later, all of a sudden, everybody has a mobile phone. And then a year later, people in Africa, in rural Africa, have a mobile phone. In India, have a mobile phone, right? This spread happened in a viral way. The same thing is going to happen, and is happening with solar energy, and it's happening at a global scale. So the other part of this is that the cost is changing for solar energy with time, but if we look across this plot, this is actually like these curves that you're seeing here are things that are called levelized costs of energy. It's basically like how much is effectively the cheapest cost for energy as electricity in different parts of the world. And what you're seeing is these bubbles are, if we follow the bubbles across to the right, it's more and more solar energy per year in a different country. So we can see that, that Mexico has a lot of solar energy, California has a lot of solar energy. If we go further to the left, eventually we're going to get to, you should see in the middle there, New Jersey. You could just as well write Pennsylvania. Okay? That's about the same solar budget. And if you look up from New Jersey, you see the country that we have right above there, that's France. Okay? And I'm going to tie that in just a second, but just keep that in mind that the amount of sun that New Jersey has is more than France has. Okay? The curves, as what we're seeing, is the cost of energy. So as they go up, I'm living in a place with more and more expensive energy. So it's not surprising that Hawaii, up in the upper right, has a high cost of energy. It's in an island. To get energy to the island is very expensive, and has a lot of sunlight. If we look at these lines of levelized cost of energy, that line is kind of a penetration curve at which point solar is an option. It's not only an option, it is the equivalent cost option. It is the option that you're going to choose because not only will it be carbon free, and in fact, photovoltaics tend to pay themselves back as a carbon budget within about 3 years. Not only will they be carbon free over their lifetime, but they will cost the same as your other electricity sources. So why wouldn't you choose them, right? So here's the big challenge. This is the other perception of bugaboo. And that is that if we live in Pennsylvania, we are embedded in an energy-rich culture. Very energy-rich, right? This is historically where we have booms of oil, booms of coal, multiple booms of coal, now booms of natural gas. We are second or third nuclear power plant generation in the nation. We are rich in energy. And it does something to perceptions. It really does something to perceptions because everywhere you go in Pennsylvania, when I came here 7 years ago, the standard message was, well, we can't really do solar here because we really don't have a lot of sun. You understand that you're doing solar, but this is not the best place to do solar. If you are a solar person, you will go to any state in the nation and you will find a community that will tell you, in Santa Barbara, we really don't have enough sun. So it's a perception thing. It's not about metrics. And this is where I've got a map that is sliced across the middle, because we want to exclude Arizona, because everybody reads those maps and they see Arizona has all this sunshine. We have about 75 to 80% of what Arizona has as a net annual budget. That's not bad. But if you cut it out of the map, because actually most of the older maps of solar resource were actually done by non-geographers, and so they're really biased representations of data. If you cut that out, you see that we have this kind of nice orangey realm all through Pennsylvania, and we're actually, a better resource than this little city here, which is Freiburg, Germany. Freiburg, Germany is the solar capital of the world. This is where major solar energy research is happening, and it's happening because the cost of energy in Germany is very high. And the cost of energy in Germany is very high because in the 1970s, the public decided to not invest in nuclear power. And what are my options out of not investing in nuclear power? Well, we're going to invest a lot more in renewables. Okay? So, you're seeing here also Madrid, Rome, Bordeaux, Freiburg. So we want to know where state colleges. It falls somewhere between Rome and Bordeaux. Okay, I'm okay with living between Rome and Bordeaux. Really nice. Okay? And the other thing is that when people come to visit State College, when they come to visit Happy Valley, when do they come? Football season. You know what the most cloudy season in all of State College is? Football season. It's a very cloudy, rainy type of area. So because of that, every visitor comes in and then they leave with the memory of the impression that don't really have much solar. But we do. And so we need to measure solar energy, and that's what we do. So at State College here, at State College, we have one of the world resources for measuring solar energy. It was built here years before I arrived. It was like having a Christmas present right there. You arrive, here is one of 7 of the nation's best solar monitoring stations. Yours, data is free. And what ended up happening was one of my former graduate students, Andrew Korschke, graduated and then used an awesome statistical software to download all this data over years to show you the sun beat of State College. So this is like a heartbeat, but it's the sun beat. This is each year's beat of the sun. And so across the top, you're seeing the total energy of the sun beating across year after year. The next one is the beam. That's the bright beam of the sun beating through. And then the lowest one is the diffuse sky, the light that's coming from all directions. But we've got a lively resource here, and we measure it. And from those measurements, we know that we have the resource that we need to develop solar energy. Okay? And I think one of those things that I want to say is why do we perceive solar energy in a strange way? It's that our eyes are not built to be effective solar detectors in a linear range, in a range that we want to know what is a good solar resource. Our eyes are extremely good at telling us, is that a lion in the dark? Is that a bear in the path? In Pennsylvania, that's actually pretty relevant. I run into bears walking my dog. But my eyes can, sense that is probably a bear and not a very large man ahead, and I can go back the other direction when the lights are very, very dim. When the lights are very, very bright, when it's a very, very bright day, my information in my eyes all adjust to give me information about what the scenario is. So great information processors, but they're basically these, they detect the highs and they detect the lows. They don't do so good in the mid-range. It can't tell you what's going on in the mid-range. And in fact, your skin is actually a better solar detector than your eyes in this sense, right? But so we've got bias detectors. We should use the detectors that we normally have. And that brings us now to talking about what we've been trying to develop here at Penn State. And that is an opportunity for developing solar on state. So we have a student chapter of the American Solar Energy Society. And that student chapter is very active and has been trying to develop photovoltaic array, photovoltaic demonstration on Penn State's campus for the last 6 or 7 years, if not more. Okay? And we have a great demonstration of solar energy in the Morningstar home. That is the 2007 solar decathlon home. And so props to Lisa, who's here, and where am I missing? Lisa. Okay, we've got we've got multiple people who were part of the design process, who managed the Morningstar home, and you yourself can go and visit and see solar energy on display at Penn State. What we want is more. We want it bigger. And so we pushed for solar on stage, but here's the deal. The cost of electricity in this area is very, very low. And there is an obligation for Penn State, to buy energy in a way that is responsible. Okay? And at this point, part of that evaluation is lowest cost. And we do a very good job of negotiating prices for the cost of electricity. If we want to get solar energy on Penn State's campus, we have a financial bridge that we have to gap, or a gap that we have to bridge. And that gap can be done. But we've thought of it before as, well, do we do this from like a major donor, major investor, an angel fund that comes in? Well, that's an opportunity, that's a possibility. That we'll wait for that. We can maybe develop that. But is there a way that we can do this that would engage the community, that would become a community participating process to help build a community solar array? And that has a lot of commonalities with what I'm sure you'll be hearing about at the close of the meeting, with a community-based solar array on community farmland. In our case, we're trying to think about this because we want a representation, we want to show leadership at Penn State for the photovoltaic array that we're participating in, and we want to draw in the community to be part of that ownership. So in a sense, this concept, this basic process is a solar garden. Okay, so we have community farms, we have share-based farming happening, right? Why can't we do that with photovoltaics? Why can't we develop a crowd-based way to grow photovoltaic projects, to grow solar projects? We think we can do that. What we are planning right now is to grow that first through setting up an alignment with stakeholders. So one of the things that I think should fall in line very closely with what you were introduced to by Laura was the idea that before we move forward, before we actually create conflict by just proposing something and running with it, what we would like to do is we'd like to follow an integrated design process. We'd like to engage stakeholders and see if we can't create alignment first, which is going to take more time, but in the end, maybe less likely to have a catastrophic failure midway, and we'll actually have those interpersonal relationships founded early in the process, rather than trying to resolve them later in the process. So in about midsummer here, in about 6 to 8 weeks' time, we will be developing a workshop where we want to bring in community members, where we want to bring in students, we want to bring in expertise from the solar field to come together to start to create this vision to move forward for community solar on state. And I'm leading that development, and so if you are interested in it, you're more than welcome to email me. I will start compiling this into a list, and we will be announcing the workshop as it comes up. And hopefully we'll find this alignment to actually do that jumpstart to get solar on Penn State's campus. So, thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I heard inclinations that some companies might see by putting solar on houses and then collecting time
Right.
to get the numbers back.
Right.
Is that something that you could also
So we have pursued that. I mean, effectively, that is what we would call a power purchase agreement, or something like a leasing strategy. That has been one of the generations of the solar on state process. About 3 years ago, we got very close to one of those processes, but ultimately that gap that we were trying to bridge, we couldn't get with that. So the idea is the firm who comes in and wants to develop that, tied into the lease, has to have some sign of low risk profitability out of this. And we happen to be in a scenario where our price of electricity is negotiated so low that it's very challenging. So if we were trying to do this in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh, we could do this as a no-brainer. It is part of our challenge being rurally located that our cost of electricity is, for us, it's conveniently low, but for that type of scenario that you're talking about becomes very challenging to negotiate. So you actually have to evaluate it and think about it in terms of the lifetime of the array.
Yeah.
And those arrays will last for 50 years, but or more, but the actual concept in terms of the lifetime of the contract might be a 25-year contract, whereas the institutions need to consider how does the payback work out within a shorter time horizon. So 5 to 10 years, 8 years at most oftentimes is the flexibility for the university. But again, the pursuing it as a simple lease or what we would call a common purchase agreement at Penn State is not is a possible strategy, but it wouldn't engage the community. It would probably not be sustainable. It would be a one-off. We wouldn't be able to grow other projects from the concept of it. And then one of the ideas with the community-based project, much as you were probably going to hear shortly, is can we create a model that we can export? And can we grow it to other places? And so in the process of developing community solar on state, one of the things that we want to do is we want to document the process. We want to show where we have successes, where we have challenges. We want that encapsulated, and we want to be able to export that model such that other universities could pick that up. And I'll tell you what, if we can do it at Penn State, there are a lot of other institutions that can do this. Because we have a very challenging scenario. What we have is an enormous alumni base. What we have is a very large population of people with a lot of willpower. So it can come, it's just going to be a multi-stakeholder solution.
Extrapolating that curve, Swanson curve,
Yeah.
Looking down the road, 20, 30, maybe 50 years, we see that pretty much every building in the world will just have photovoltaics. And it's wall, it's roof, everything will be pretty much standardized. You won't have to get an engineer to design the system for you. It'll be, you go to Lowe's and you buy your everything. Battery technology, also you've got much better storage. So effectively, what I'm talking about is, the power grid, as you know, would be greatly reduced.
True. I think that if we think of it only in terms of buildings, we won't make it. The idea of plastering every rooftop across the nation with photovoltaics is kind of an ideal concept, but one, not everybody wants photovoltaics on their buildings, no matter how integrated you might think of them. And two, there's only, in residential buildings, there's been studies, there's only about 30% of residential rooftops that are actually accessible for solar, and commercial buildings is probably only 60%, and we need much, much more, ultimately, spread out to accomplish our goals. That being said, now we need to think about systems integration, where maybe we're having photovoltaics that are combined with pasture land. Okay, so maybe we have a grazing land combined with photovoltaic panels that is actually serving a nearby urban center. The more urbanized we get, right, the less rooftop I actually have for the density of population that I have. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that we need to have photovoltaics to solve all our problems in solar energy, in energy use, and the building energy demand can be radically changed from where we're at to. Yes?
Is there enough materials, substances that go into these photovoltaic cells in water supplies and so on around the world to really have this thing ramp up?
Yes. So the main material we think of is silicon, which is derived from the silica that is in sand. Actually, silicon is the second most abundant element in the Earth's crust. So we have enough of that, but we also have abundant supplies of other alternate materials. And essentially when we say that the learning curve for silicon has had a really, pleasant drop for these photovoltaic prices, that actually has followed the microelectronics industry. So it's actually the learning curve that's been paired. I mean, so photovoltaics has actually benefited from riding alongside the silicon manufacturing for microelectronics. So yes, we have enough. It's one of those scenarios where we are using a very earth abundant material, and we wouldn't be in a scenario of creating like a strategic mineral, the way that we think of rare earth minerals. So one of the kind of media blunders that has happened is people put out that rare earth minerals are inside the photovoltaics. They're not. They're in batteries, they're in magnets, but they're not in photovoltaics. So it's odd, but it's it's a scientific fine point, but they're not. So we don't actually have a strategic mineral problem. Yes, sir. Oh, the solar hybrids. So so the development ideas are there are many ideas out there. One of the ideas is to develop a solar highway, or to either incorporate photovoltaics inside of the pavement, or in Germany they've already had photovoltaic, and actually Germany and maybe even Oregon has strips of highway that use right-of-way to incorporate photovoltaics along the sides. Those are absolutely possibilities, and honestly are probably more likely to be captured because of just land use, and that we can maybe accomplish it in a large swath. Yes, sir?
Good evening. So one of the things you mentioned a lot was overcast and all this, and I hear all the time about how Penn State, or State College in area is comparable to Seattle in terms of climate.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, so this is kind of a two-part question. In regards to that, do you think that solar energy, like how do we make the argument that solar energy is the best alternative energy uses of wind? Because I think right now we use 10% wind energy. And the other part of that was, you mentioned as well that the cloudiest time for Penn State is during the fall, where you have most traffic and all that. So because we're a state, because we're a university area where almost like half of the town and population leaves over the summer where it's most sunny, how do we, are there processes for solar energy to store a lot of energy, a lot of time to allow that energy that's used in the sun that really isn't used as much to be used during the fall and during the spring and during the seasons?
So first off, is Pennsylvania like Seattle for solar conditions? It's sunnier. Okay. Okay. This is where we benefit from having faculty members who have actually lived in this area. No, that's actually a cloudy day indicator, which any meteorologist would tell you is actually a really, really loose term and has nothing to do with the actual solar resource. Actually, we've been working extensively at Penn State with meteorological faculty, and it's been a great learning process of tying science and engineering of the solar conversion process with meteorologists to say, we both are missing basic pieces to actually combine as an estimate. But if you go back to storage issues and stuff like that, we are at such a low penetration percentage of photovoltaics. I mean, we are less than 1% of the electricity in the grid. We're less than 0.5%. I think we are maybe 0.2%. Okay? I would worry about storage when we hit 5. Okay? And we've got a good run to go before that happens. But here's the deal. When we start hitting those larger percentages, we're talking about maybe 10 years out. Okay? By the time we hit 2018, 4 years from now, the levelized cost of energy will be actually, there will be a majority of the planet where areas will have levelized cost of energy, and the adoption of solar will really cross the threshold, I think, tipping point. But storage is growing at the same time. So right now, right here, we don't worry about storage. We generate a small fraction of renewable energy through solar. We share it with the grid. And the grid is most definitely a mixture of fossil fuels and nuclear power. And we grow that. And as retrofits and renovations come around, we start thinking about what our options are, and storage will be coming online. It's just not quite there yet, but it will be. Thank you for your time.
Once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. We will be staying after we have folks signed up from our state organizing for action organization here. We have Mark Maloney from Greenmore Gardens and OFA and Fossil Free will all be sticking around to answer any more questions. And so, informal setting following this meeting. Thanks for coming out. We really hope that you've taken this